What is going on, you beautiful bastards? Welcome back to the channel. I'm Brandon Sylvia. This is Unnecessary Rambling. Thank you all for stopping by today to listen to me ramble about what I am playing, what I have been playing over the last few weeks for December. Got a pretty big list here for December. A weird month where a lot of shit was kind of like stacking on top of itself with the release dates. And only 3 games here that I finished this month, and well, technically only one that, or only 2, because one came out in mid-November. So I finished that. I technically, I guess, finished it in December, but I games that released in December, only 2 here that I was able to finish so far, but still a good list to dive into. But we'll more kind of focus on like the Callisto Protocol and High on Life, since I finished both of those, and then we will quickly cover Midnight Suns and Final Fantasy VII Crisis Core Reunion. Don't have as much to say about either of those two, but we'll dive pretty deep here into the Callisto Protocol and High on Life. But before we do all of that, I want to wish you all a happy holiday season. I think by the time this comes out, it will be either early 2023 or like super late 2022. So either which way, the Christmas season and all of that stuff will have passed more than likely. So I hope everything, I hope you had a good time with your people and enjoyed the holidays. But definitely hit me up down in the comments as well. Shoot the breeze with me about what you've been playing as of late. If anything has stood out to you, caught your eye, be sure to mention that down in the comments below, and I will shoot the breeze with you as always. But with everything out of the way, let's go ahead and kick this thing off, and let's go ahead and quickly, I'll talk about Evil West just really quickly. I finished it. I talked about it in the last video. I just gushed about it for whatever 10-15 minutes in the last video, or the last what I'm playing video, and I feel exactly the same way. My thoughts haven't changed on it really at all. This is for sure, well, I guess I can spoil it. This will be coming out after the ranking video where I ranked the games that I've played in 2022, or the games that released in 2022 that I've played. Evil West was, I believe, number 3 on that list. So yeah, by the time I finished it, I was even hotter on it than when I got finished doing that last what I'm playing video. I am just red hot on this game. I think it is incredible. It is for sure one of the most fun video games I've played in 2022, and I think I kind of conveyed all that in the last video, but that did not wear out by the time I finished the game. It stayed strong from the moment I began playing it to the moment I finished it. There were no lulls, no dips in quality, no pacing issues. It probably took me 12 hours to finish it, and did not overstay its welcome one bit. It has its narrative beats that it's trying to hit. It's not any world-class story. It's not your God of Wars or Horizons or anything like that, but they do have their cinematic moments, and it allows you to get invested into something. But really what it is, it's a vessel to carry you to the next combat encounter, and you're just going to have the best damn time in those combat arenas. If you like that old school, character action style of God of War from the PS2 days, or your Gears of War games, you'll love Evil West, man. And you're just constantly fucking around with the different gadgets and different weapons and different upgrades and abilities, and you just have this crazy arsenal of weaponry. You have your Gatling guns and your flamethrowers and your dynamite sticks that you're upgrading, and they're sticking to enemies, and just this awesome arsenal of weapons. And then that gauntlet that you're using to just brutalize enemies with this up close melee encounter, and then like this zapper technology that's allowing you to tether to the enemies and kind of grapple your way towards them, or grapple them towards you. And then, with that huge ability skill tree that you're upgrading the guns and the weapons, but you're also upgrading your abilities. And by the end of the game, you're raining down lightning on your enemies. You're fucking using the little dynamite sticks to spawn tornadoes, and it's just incredibly fun, man. Like, it's not trying to be anything more than like that 7th gen era combat focused, gameplay focused, fun ass experience. But there is still like a cool little storyline in there if you want to dive into that stuff. It's like that alternate history sort of timeline. I believe it's like in the 1800s, and you're trying to keep your father alive. You're chasing down this creepy ass little girl. It's got like a western flair and aesthetic to it. And yeah, I think the cutscenes are presented well. The characters look solid in the cutscenes. Outside of the cutscenes, not so great. The NPCs and shit definitely don't look anywhere on the level of like your high budget AAA games. But that's not what you're there for, man. You're there for that bombastic ass action-packed experience, and it's just a badass game. It really is a badass fun game that is like embracing the fact that it's a video game. I loved my time with this game, and yeah, you'll notice that by its inclusion and where it's included on that ranking video for the games that I played this year. I truly adored this damn game. I think it's sitting at like a 72 on Metacritic. I promise you guys, watch some gameplay of this thing. Wait for a sale. I do understand that there's always going to be that crowd out there who they're like, I'm not paying $60 for a 10-hour game. I totally get that. There's nothing wrong with waiting for a sale. I imagine this thing will get a deep sale at some point. If you can grab this for $20-$30, it's an absolute steal. I have a hard time seeing anyone who's into this style of game, and like I said, I'll have gameplay running here. If you like what you see, it's nonstop that, but getting new powers, new weapons, new shit to engage with. I really had a blast with this. One of my favorite games of 2022, bar none. Okay, so next up, let's go ahead and talk about the game that I'm sure we'll spend the most time talking about out of anything on this list here, and that is the Callisto Protocol. So, man, this is a discussion that can go many different directions. I think the first thing I want to say about the Callisto Protocol is that I feel like I may have had my expectations set too high for this game when looking at it practically. Like, I know technically the team at Striking Distance, a lot of the members there have worked together on other games in the past, but under this new umbrella, with this new studio, this is technically the first game they've put out together under Striking Distance. So, I mean, for a first game, if you look at it in that regard, and instead of trying to directly compare it to Dead Space, which I'm guilty of as well, and I'm sure throughout this discussion here, I will compare it to Dead Space many a times. But if you look at it based off its own merit, there is a really strong first outing here, and in my opinion. I think that there's some weird design choices, which we'll get into all of that, but for one, it's a unique game, and I don't think I was expecting this game to be nearly as unique as it is. I think, like most of you, we look at this, and from even, you're looking at the main character, Jacob, you're looking at his attire and his suit that he's wearing when he's not in the, prison jumpsuit thing. It's very Dead Space inspired. You're looking at the health bar on the back of the neck. You're looking at like the kind of stasis gun, and these different things are making you go, okay, well, this is obviously the spiritual successor to Dead Space. And it's not really, I mean, you can compare it to Dead Space, but there is a huge main difference at the core of Callisto Protocol, and that's the fact that this game is like 95% melee focused. And I don't know if that was just not conveyed properly in the trailers, or if because there was a certain point where I just kind of went media blackout on the Callisto Protocol because I knew I was going to play it. And so maybe during those deep gameplay dives, they went in depth to show people like, oh, this is a very melee centric combat loop, and I just didn't see that. But holy shit, I mean, 90% of my game I'm spent dodging and melee attacking the shit out of my different enemies that I'm running up against. And for the first maybe 3 hours, 2.5, 3 hours of the game, I was like, man, this is so fucking cool. It's got that suffering sort of vibe going on with the prison setting, but forcing me up close to getting into these visceral combat scenarios where I'm having to watch the enemy's pattern of the kind of the combos that they're throwing at me. So if they're throwing a 1-2 left right and then coming at me with a damn fucking overhand for the third power strike, then I know I got to dodge 1, 2, 3. If they're coming at me with 4, I got to dodge 1, 2, 3, 4, and it's all predicated on the left analog stick, like the stick that you move with. And so the dodge mechanic is you can't use the same direction more than twice. So if an enemy is throwing a 3-punch combo at you, you would have to go left, right, left to be able to get out of harm's way and not have that enemy land any of the 3 attacks. And this is like the core feature, the core mechanic that you are going to have to get familiarized with very, very early on to have any success in this game whatsoever. If you go, if you just hold down in a certain direction, left or right, the first attack, you'll dodge. The second one, you'll get hit. So you can't hold the same direction for more than one attack. You constantly have to be going left to right, left to right. And that is, but also you can't be like in the middle of a dodge either. So like you have to wait for that first attack to miss from the enemy, and then if you're holding left, then go back to right, wait for the second attack, then go back to left for the third attack. And there is some level of skill required there. The only frustrating element with that to me is that the camera is so fucking up Jacob's ass. Like, it is so over the shoulder. And if you were ever in a tight environment, you are shit out of luck, because you're not going to be able to see anything behind you, to the sides of you. You'll only see the one enemy in front of you. So if you're ever in a situation where there's like 3-4 enemies coming at you and you're enclosed in some tight corridor, you're kind of fucked for the game. And that's something that, once again, I kind of look at that and go, oh, well, that's easily fixed for the second one. If they have a second game, that could be easily remedied. In that way, it's kind of promising to go, okay, well, to me, that's the biggest issue of the entire game, is that the camera just sucks at times. I don't think, like, I've heard some people say that the dodge mechanic is what threw them off. I really don't, and I can't speak for people, but I'm about to speak for people. I don't think the dodge mechanic threw them off as much as they think it did. I think the camera fucking sucked so bad that they thought the dodge mechanic sucked. I don't think that's what it is. I think if you were able to see all the different enemies, you would easily be able to, perform your perfect dodges. Sure, sometimes it's going to be a little bit more difficult than others, but if the main issue to me with the camera, if that was remedied in the next game, I think we have a totally different situation on our hands with the Callisto Protocol. Because, I mean, right now, this is for sure one of the more divisive games that I've seen release in quite some time. And I'm kind of like in the middle on it. I think that there's always this consistent discourse that either resides on like one extreme or the other. It does seem like a lot of people either have to completely love something or completely hate it, and not much middle ground in between. And I just kind of feel like this is a good, not great game. Like that would be my overall takeaway. It's a good, not great game. I like I said, I do really enjoy how different it is. This is a unique game, man. A melee focused survival horror title that makes you really get up close and personal with these enemies. That's something that, I mean, outside of like Dying Light, which Dying Light's a lot more parkour focused, there's not many games that are trying to be like a challenging melee focused combat system in the survival horror world. And that's the other thing too that I think caused a lot of the division with the Callisto Protocol, is that a lot of people found it to be really, really challenging. And once again, I don't think it's a challenging game. I think there's just really bad camera issues that can cause you to die a lot. Like I don't think most people would die from this if they didn't run into that level of camera issues. Which I'm not saying there's no difficulty in the game whatsoever. There are for sure some challenging moments, but a lot of it is kind of how you upgraded your character, how you planned out going into certain battles and certain boss fights and shit. Like for instance, early on in the game, I was finding I was just finding it really simple. So I kept on selling my health injectors and my ammunition, except for, you know, a few bullets. I would keep like 6, 8, whatever on hand, because there were so few inventory slots. And there's not like a crate where you can go, you know, in Resident Evil you have like your crates that are in the save rooms, and you can go and put extra ammunition that you don't need or green herbs that you don't need, and you can kind of come back to all that shit whenever you're running into a boss you're struggling with or whatnot. Like there's none of that in the Callisto Protocol. So whenever you fill up like your 6 inventory slots at the beginning of the game, that's really all you get. So you're needing to constantly sell shit or drop different items to free up inventory slots for things that you do need. And so for me, I was like, okay, well, if I'm not struggling with the game, I'm just going to constantly sell my health injectors, which I didn't like using those in general because they're so unreliable in battle, because it took Jacob so long to inject himself that it was like, okay, well, I can't even realistically use this thing in any battle scenario. I'm just going to get pummeled. So I would pretty much constantly sell every health injector that I got, other than like maybe one or so to have on hand if I got real low after a battle. And I would sell a lot of the ammunition except for a couple whenever, you know, you would do your melee attacks, and after like 2-3 hits, a little reticle would pop up on the enemy and you could shoot them, and that would do like extra damage. Like an extra powerful shot would I guess be granted to you for performing a certain number of melee attacks. And then that's kind of the thing too, where I just focused solely on the melee side of things because it felt like that was the path that the game was leading me down. So it was like, okay, well, if we're just going to rely on melee combat, I'm going to double down on speccing my character and upgrading my character to where that's what he is best at. And once you get the ability, the upgrade to break the enemy's arm whenever they go to like block your baton attacks, you're totally overpowered at that point. You can just pretty much spam R2 on you know, especially in any sort of 1-on-1, 2-on-1 style encounters. You're golden at that point. The only time it gets more difficult is when you're, you know, taking on 3, 4, 5 enemies at a time. But there were a few sections, like there's one boss fight in particular that you can't use melee on at all, and you have to use your ammunition, your bullets. And I wasn't prepared whatsoever. I only had a handful of bullets on me, and I went into that boss encounter and I was like, dude, I have to drop the damn difficulty here. I'm not going to be able to get through this with the limited amount of ammunition that I have on me. And if you got too close to him, he just like one hit kills you. And so there are a few of there was 2 or 3 sections where I just had to crank the difficulty down. So I'm not sitting here and saying that there's no difficulty spike or no challenge that you're going to run into with the Callisto Protocol, but I would say that the majority of deaths that I had were a lot more predicated on being in a really tight space, in these like tight corridors, not really being able to see what's around me, and taking on the enemy that I can see, and then being attacked from behind or from the sides by the enemy that I couldn't see. So that's the number one complaint I have with the game, is that the camera's just not really good at all. There's other issues for sure. I had some weird technical hiccups where I would pick up these different audio logs and the audio just wouldn't play at all. I could still like read the subtitles. The subtitles would pop up, but no audio playing whatsoever. So I'm just kind of sitting there reading the subtitles, which I don't mind, but it little weird shit like that. Definitely a few minor, not anything significant, like, but towards the later half of the game, I did run into a few frame rate issues, like mainly actually during cutscenes, which is really weird. Or like those transition shots where you're like transitioning out of the cutscene into gameplay, but it's still trying to be slightly cinematic. I had a few frame rate hiccups there, but I know that supposedly on the Xbox Series X and the PC version, it was really rough, like performance issues galore. So I didn't have that level of performance issues. I played it on the PS5. Supposedly that's the best platform to pick up the Callisto Protocol on. So I take that into consideration if you are looking to go and check this thing out. And also, take into consideration that it is a smaller game. Like, I probably maybe 12 hours, 10, 12 hours or so finished the game in. It's $70. So definitely, something to take into consideration, especially when, at least in my opinion, it is definitely a ways away from being the game that I think it could be. There's a lot that could be done here to make the Callisto Protocol, hopefully, to make the sequel a lot better. And kind of touching on that is something I want to be clear on. I do want to see the Callisto Protocol continue. I would like to at least get one more game to see what they could clean up, and because I think there's a unique game here. I really do. It's fun, man. It's fun to have these, kind of playgrounds of destruction where you have just spikes lined up across walls and fans to throw enemies into with your telekinetic, your stasis sort of attacks. I forget the name that they use in the Callisto Protocol, but grabbing enemies with your telekinetic abilities and just throwing them into these spiked walls or throwing them into fans and just seeing them get fucking disintegrated. Like, it's a fun world to mess around with. Even like the little stealth sections where you have enemies who are, I believe, blind, and you can just kind of stealth up to them and take them down. And the enemy AI is a bit kind of fucking dumb, but because like you can be right next to, like, have two enemies lined up side by side, take one down, the other one doesn't hear it, you just take them down too. It's maybe that's a bug that they patched out by now, but it is fun to mess around in these little playgrounds that they've designed for you. And it's a brutal, visceral game, despite its many issues, which it does have many issues. Enemy variety is lacking, location variety is lacking. I think the prison setting from the get-go is cool. I think that it does kind of give you vibes of The Suffering, which is a nice little nostalgic feel, but you're seeing a lot of the same thing in that prison, and it does have a repetition to it. And then when you get out of the prison, it's a lot of, snowy location, kind of laboratory vibes. It's not doing anything that you haven't seen before with the world, with the story. But I will say, to the story's credit, is it's a deeply cinematic game. I wasn't expecting this to have such a focus on the narrative or on the cinematics. Like, I, I, I think you probably have 2.5, 3 hours of cutscenes with the Callisto Protocol. Like, it's a very, very cinematic ass game. And the story, I found the characters to be interesting. I thought that the story of Jacob being wrongfully imprisoned or believed to be wrongfully imprisoned, and then this weird mutation, this experiment gone wrong that was being like a test study inside of this prison gone wrong. These mutations happen that create these monsters, and now you're trying to escape this prison, and then running into different companions, and it's like, well, shit, I'm meeting you guys in prison. Can I trust you at all? And then running into a person later in the game where it's like, I know I fucking can't trust you, but shit, it looks like we're destined to figure this shit out together or end up totally fucked. And then even like the moments of the story where you're given a little bit of agency. Like, I'm sure a lot of you saw the one in the water chute where you're sliding down the water chute and trying to avoid the different obstacles and trying not to get fucking chopped to pieces. But those moments are really, really fucking cool. And there's one later on where I'll just say you're kind of floating. I'll leave it at that. But it's badass to see this shit take place and to have those story moments that are allowing you to kind of control the character a little bit and, feel some sort of agency in what is going on in the narrative. And I mean, there's solid performances in this game. Like there's kind of high tier Hollywood actors and actresses who are voicing the main characters for the Callisto Protocol. Like Josh Duhamel is the main character, Jacob. And then you have the lady from Suicide Squad, I forget her name, but she's voicing Danny in the Callisto Protocol. I'll clip it in here who she is, but they went out and got some pretty fucking high tier actors to come in and play these characters, and visually, you can see the level of production and animation and motion capture that went into getting these performances and trying to tell a meaningful, impactful story. And while, like I said, I don't think it's the most original storyline of all time, I do think it's executed well, and I do think the performances are solid, and the visuals, like, this is for sure one of the most visually striking games that you can play on your next gen consoles. I would love to see for the sequel, if we can get that in a couple years and not have it attached to anything last gen. Like, I can't imagine how damn beautiful this game would be if it wasn't being held back by last gen consoles. But look, man, overall, I think the Callisto Protocol is a very unique horror game. It's a game that, speaking, I guess we can go into that for a second here before we close this off. It's not a really scary survival horror game. There's good moments of like quick little jump scares, some shock value. The enemy designs and monster variety are for sure lacking. The mutations and how the monsters mutate and kind of all become the same one creature leaves a little bit to be desired for sure, but it's more of like a gory horror experience. It's a lot more about the brutality. It's a lot more about the tension that is caused, or the horror that is caused. What am I trying to say here? It's a lot more about the horror that you get from the tension of being forced into those up close encounters in that melee style of battle, and trying to anticipate and telegraph the enemy's next move. It's a lot more about that than it is about sheer atmospheric horror that you're getting from one location to the next, and feeling that sense of dread as you're just walking around and waiting for something to pop out at you. You know shit's gonna pop out at you all the time, because it's a lot more of an action focused horror game than it is just a cerebral or a psychological horror game. It's not really trying to be that at all, which I don't really think Dead Space was either, but there was maybe smarter use of enemy placement in Dead Space to where things would pop out at you when you're least expecting it, and they would play with that a lot more. And I think that the sound design, it is really really solid with the Callisto Protocol, but maybe not quite on that Dead Space level across the board. So I don't find it to be a particularly just frightening game, but there is good tension that's created in those close-up melee encounters. But it is a little bit more of an action horror game than just like your true blue survival horror titles. And that's fine with me. I like, all different types of horror. It's not as bombastic as something like a Dying Light 2, and it's not as subdued as something like a Resident Evil 7. It's a nice little blend in the middle there. And I like I said, despite its many issues, this is a good first game. Not great, but a good first game that I would I would for sure like to see more of in the future. Okay, so on the PlayStation 5, it is currently sitting at a 71 on Metacritic. I don't think that's unfair. I do think it's a little bit low. For me, I'm more mid-sevens on it or so. I'd say I'm like a 7.6, 7.7 if I had to like put some stamp on it. I don't think a 7.1 is really unfair at all though, but yeah, I hope in the next game, maybe we can... I like the melee focus to combat for sure. I think it's fun. I like battering the shit out of those enemies over and over and over with the melee attacks. And but I would like to, use my guns a little bit more, which I will say towards the back end of the game, I started realizing, okay, I got to upgrade at least one weapon, because I had upgraded my baton fully, and I was like, all right, well, let me upgrade at least one weapon more so I can utilize that in combat, and then you get, more inventory slots later on in the game. So I was like, all right, for the last few hours, let me try to actually shoot a little bit more. So I just upgraded the fuck out of my shotgun, because I figured, okay, if I'm constantly in these close encounters, these melee designed encounters, then let me try to have something that's good for those close quarter combat. So I just got this overpowered ass shotgun and tried to upgrade that to its max as well. And I felt like when I started getting into the flow with, okay, melee shotgun, melee shotgun, that style of thing, and then kind of understanding as soon as the enemy was about to mutate, then just immediately blasting them in the gut to where you could stop the mutation from occurring, and it pretty much just knocks them down. You go and stomp on them, and that's the thing too. It's similar to your Dead Space games, where you go and you stomp on your enemy after you've defeated them. You get your little health item or your little Callisto credits, and I don't even know if I mentioned that. I think I did mention that. That's what I was doing the whole game, is going and trading my health injectors and my bullets for Callisto credits to continuously just upgrade my baton over and over and over again. So I don't think that's a bad play style, but I would be curious how fun the shooting is if you, or even how viable the shooting is if you went that approach early on in the game and just tried to upgrade the shit out of your, like, say, your pistol and your stasis ability, and didn't really focus on your baton. I imagine you would have a lot of trouble with that, but I don't know, maybe not. I could be totally wrong, and I might have just played in not the best way possible, but it did feel a lot like it was pushing me towards using a lot of melee attacks. So I was like, all right, well, if you're going to push me towards this, I'm just going to be prepared and upgrade the shit out of those attacks. But if any of you did play with more of a long range focus and upgraded your pistols or your different guns and went with that approach opposed to going all melee, let me know, because I'd be curious to know how that worked to your benefit or to your detriment. But yeah, overall, man, I had fun with the Callisto Protocol. It's not something I would recommend for $70, although, I'm not trying to, everybody can go and spend money however the fuck they want to. That's not my business. But if someone came to me and was like, hey, would you recommend I go buy this for $70? I would say no, but I would recommend, if you're a fan of like action horror then I would say there's something here worth at least checking out. It might not click with you if you play it for 3-4 hours and you're like, yeah, it's not for me. I totally get that. But there is something here at least worth kind of diving into as even just sort of an experiment to see if you think there's more that could be done in this franchise, because I really do think there is more, and I think there is potential for this to be like a huge hit. There's a lot of cleaning up that needs to be done. So if you have played the Callisto Protocol, I'm for sure curious to hear your experience, because this is, like I said, one of those games that seems to be splitting people down the middle, and I'm kind of somewhere in that middle, maybe a little bit more towards the hotter on it side, but I kind of understand where everyone is coming from. I guess I shouldn't say I would understand everyone's response to it. I could understand people not liking it much at all, and I could understand people liking it a good bit. I don't know if I could really understand people being like totally, this is the best game of all time. This is my number one horror game of all time. I don't feel like many people feel quite that strongly for the Callisto Protocol. I would find that response to be a little bit odd, but I would definitely love to hear if someone does feel that way. I would absolutely love to hear why. All right, and next up, let's dive into the only other game that I finished this month, which would be High on Life. And this is a game that I definitely did not expect to finish. I saw the trailers and all that, and I was like, man, I could see that being very, very grating over time, that humor getting really, really old. But I dove into this thing, and it was one that just I was completely sucked into from the first moment. Fucking little alien invasion happens on your block. You're playing as this like burnout high school kid. Your parents leave for a vacation. Little alien invasion takes place, and you go and find this damn talking gun who is giving you directions on how to reclaim your reality, to take down these aliens, to save humanity, if you will. And I was like, holy shit, this is way more interesting. And I think it's the thing too where you're watching the trailers and you're like, okay, I could see how I could see how some of those jokes would be funny, but the frequency at which they're happening when you're watching the trailer, it's just you passively watching it. And so it feels overwhelming almost, where it's like, man, are they ever going to shut the fuck up? But when you're playing the game, you're focusing on the act of playing the game. So to have those like little one-liners from fucking like high named actors, JB Smooth and Tim Robinson, and these are the characters that are the talking guns in the game. So they're delivering like solid little quips and jokes, and they're witty, and it's so wild to see these guns emoting in the weirdest, most natural way. It's bizarre, but it's so cool to see like the animation that they put in to these guns and how they can actually express emotion and shit. They feel like other main characters in the game. It's really fucking interesting, man. And so yeah, I had no, like, I never dove into any of the Rick and Morty stuff, never dove into anything Justin Roiland has ever created. So this was totally fresh for me. I really didn't know what to expect other than the comedy that we got in the trailers. And I feel like the trailers were purposefully, I don't know about purposefully, but the trailers, it seemed, in my opinion, that they were toned down, and a lot of the more fucked up or the darker humor was left out of the trailers. And immediately, man, you're just bombarded with super nihilistic humor, like enemies. You're killing these enemies, and they're fucking proud. They're happy to get slaughtered by you and shit. They're audibly telling you how happy they are to be fucking killed by you and shit. It's like those little jokes landed so well for me. And like, sure, by the end of the game, is it a situation where you've kind of seen the majority of what's going to be thrown at you? For the most part, I wouldn't disagree with that, but they do still, like, the final boss has some, kind of references to let's just say some classic games that fuck with you, and it like they do enough to mix it up and to give you like new little gags and new little one-liners that get you to chuckle throughout the entire time playing it.
Ah! What the fuck? You have to do everything the fucking UI tells you to do?
Yeah. Fuck you, Jane, you piece of shit.
Oh shit, sorry.
It's fine. I've lived through worse.
And there's certain moments, like I think I probably laughed out loud more while playing this than really any other game ever. There's enough of those shocking little jokes thrown in there.
Also, all our children are in their 30s at least, so this isn't about them. We don't really care if they die, we just happen to be moms who hate violence. Have fun out there, kids.
I'm Senator Thomas Michael Phillips, and
that I would be surprised. Look, everybody's sense of humor is definitely different, and there are people who just like don't enjoy humor, don't like to kind of like the highbrow community out there, the highbrow critics who everything has to be of that ilk. Like, I'm really not like that. I like dumb, shticky humor. I don't mind that at all. I don't consider myself a fucking comedy savant. So this doesn't bother me really at all. And I actually kind of thought the other way about Justin Roiland for the longest time and Rick and Morty. I had the impression, I guess wrongfully so, that his crowd was kind of that, oh, well, you just don't get it crowd. And that's typically kind of like my least favorite people on the planet. Like, I don't really, I just don't resonate with that. Like, if somebody doesn't like something, it seems a little bit cheap to just go on the defensive and say, oh, well, you're not smart enough to get it or whatever. It's like, I don't know. I don't feel like that's an appropriate response to somebody not liking something that you do like. But yeah, I really, really enjoyed this game. It's got such a clear vision, artistically, stylistically, tonally, like everything. It's a very, very clear vision here. And like, you even have little dialogue decisions that pop up. You get to make some choices in the game. It's nothing all that impactful, but it does help the narrative flow along better, feeling like you have some agency in what's going on with the story. It's the actual first person shooting of High on Life is pretty standard fare. It's nothing that's going to reinvent the wheel for first person shooters. It's nothing that you haven't seen before. It's just kind of a, like we talked about earlier with Evil West, with the story kind of being the vessel for the gameplay. The first person shooting is just sort of a vessel for the story and for the jokes and for the writing. It's just a way to actually engage with the gameplay on a moment-to-moment basis. But they do a good enough job of adding in fun little mechanics to the game. Like, traversal is really improved by, like, when you get the web swinging ability, you can just swing around all the different environments. If there's like a little tethering lock on, which usually anywhere you're at, you'll look up and you'll see something to tether to. You just shoot the gun, you web swing to the different point where you tether, and then later in the game you get a damn jetpack, and then that becomes increasingly fun. So you're floating around, you're tethering while jetpacking, and they do a good job of adding in fun ways to just move around the world. And there's like little puzzles and little chests that you can, it's like this, I don't even know what the fuck you would call it. It's like a little dude with two pointy eyeballs sticking up, but it's pretty much like a chest. And sometimes they're in like really hard to reach spots, and you'll use your jetpack, you'll tether, there's like little objects that you can use to like shoot you flying in a direction that propels you up, and then you kind of use your jetpack from there and then try to land wherever the little boxes that you're wanting to open. And and then you have your different guns that all have their different abilities as you're going through the game and unlocking the new weapons. And Like, for example, a gun that you get kind of early on, I don't want to spoil any of the later stuff, but a gun that you get kind of early on is a gun named Gus. And it's a shotgun, but it also acts as like a telekinetic pull to bring enemies towards you, and like a disc shooter to slice enemies in half, and you even can like use the discs. You can shoot the discs at walls, certain walls, and then use that to platform onto those walls and to reach certain vantage points that you weren't able to reach before. So there's just really cool little upgrades and abilities. Like, you go into a pawn shop, and that's where you can buy different abilities for your character, and even like little fun encounters or little fun character moments take place when you're going and just buying shit at the pawn shop. You'll jump on the counter because you're trying to get like a closer look at the items in the pawn shop, and then I believe the dad of the pawn shop, the owner of the pawn shop, he has a son sitting there, and he'll tell the son, "Hey, buddy, won't you tell this kind man to get off our counter?"
Jor, be a doll and tell the customer to stop climbing on our shelf.
No, I think it's cool they're doing that. I think it kicks serious ass.
And the son will like banter back and forth with the dad, be like, "No, fuck that. That's cool. I think it's cool that he's running across our countertops." It's just little things that they accounted for, little scenarios that they accounted for. Like, there's a big traffic pileup, is kind of in the earlier parts of the game, and you're just sitting there listening to these characters bicker back and forth about this traffic pileup, or this little wreck that took place. And it's dope how many little scenarios that they accounted for here and that they placed in. And like, you have this bounty hunter dude that you run into, and he's kind of giving you intel and leading you along the way to get to the final boss and all that. And he ends up moving into your house, and you have this older sister, and the bounty hunter dude, he's like homeless, and he's got his legs chopped off and shit, and he's bickering back and forth all the time with your sister. And like, by the end of the game, he's developing this fatherly role.
Who's gonna have to deal with all your mutant kids running around this house? Me!
Yeah, not that it matters, but I'm the one who would get pregnant.
Not the way his species works. They get pregnant real easy.
I'm so sick of this shit.
He's trying to protect your sister from this shitty boyfriend that I can't even, well, I mean, I won't go into that. It's not like I don't think many people would care, but their relationship ends up in a funny ass place. And like, they have fucking Applebee's. Somehow they got an Applebee's in the game, and you actually go when you're sitting with Kenny, the handgun, in Applebee's at one point towards the back end of the game, and he's like telling you he's telling you this stupid fucking story, and like, it ends up being this just kind of, it ends up being a real funny payoff. I'll just say that the whole Kenny saga towards the end of the game is really, really fucking funny. And yeah, it's a game, man. I could see this not being for certain people. And look, gameplay mechanic wise, sure, even though you do get your different guns, and like, one of my favorite guns is like this constant, it's this just super stuck up snobby pistol that you get, or it's like a quick fire, like semi-automatic pistol, and you're blasting the shit out of enemies with the pistol, and you can kind of use it to, you can shoot out a bubble, and it will slow down time for anything that's trapped inside the bubble. So you also use that to get to like, say there's a fan or something that's blocking a crate that you were wanting to get, you could shoot the bubble at the fan, block the fan for a second, then go in there and get the crate that was guarded off by the fan. And then there's a lot of cool weapons, upgrades, abilities, and shit. Like, you get a super slide ability. I think that's what I was talking about with the pawn shop. You get like the super slide ability from the pawn shop, where you go running and you press slide, and if you slide and run into an enemy, they'll like go flying and shit. It's just a funny game. And even with I do think, even with the additions, the upgrades, the abilities, the cool weapons and stuff, it's still a pretty standard, fun little game. Like, it's not doing anything just ridiculously innovative. But if you are into that style of humor, and I'll put in a couple little clips here of different jokes that I found funny and shit. If you're into what you're seeing on the screen, if this gameplay looks somewhat interesting to you and you have Game Pass, I would highly recommend at least trying to check it out, because I didn't expect to be wowed by this style of humor or this story really at all, but it got me. It for sure got me.
Probably just gonna not go down there, to be honest. But it is pretty crazy you killed a gang lord. And she was a woman, though. Not very feminist of you to kill a woman in power.
I think the characters are incredibly well written. I think just the jokes in general are well done, and it's a lot for sure. I won't deny that, but you can go in and kind of lessen the frequency of the jokes. I didn't do that because even like with something like Guardians of the Galaxy that came out 2021, I believe, that was one where I heard a lot of people talking about how redundant or not redundant, how the frequency of the dialogue could get a little bit tiresome to people, but I never really felt that way. I kind of always like having those little quips thrown in and shit. Like I don't really mind that, because I'm just sitting here in battle, and having a character talk frequently doesn't disturb me too much. The same thing with Horizon Forbidden West. Like, people complaining about Aloy talking too much. It's like, I don't know. I don't really feel that way. Maybe I'm just more lenient, or more, honestly, it's more just a lack of care. Like, I don't think I care enough about those things. As long as the dialogue's decently well written and not annoying. Like, with Forspoken, there's some shit where in Forspoken I'm like, okay, that's weirdly written dialogue, and I could see if that is on a constant loop, I could see maybe being annoyed or put off by that. Or like the new Tales from the Borderlands, like that humor didn't really land with me, because some of the frequency at which those jokes are being rapid fire shot out and just personally not landing with me. Like, there's certain games where it clicks, certain games where it doesn't. So everybody has a different sense of humor for sure, but I am a little bit more open to kind of that overabundance of dialogue. It's not something that usually bothers me too bad, especially if it's decently well written. And I think the jokes in High on Life are really, really solid with that kind of free form, sort of off the cuff nature at which they're presented. I think it's a really damn cool game. And if you have Game Pass and a few hours to kill, it's not a big game, whatever, probably 12, 15 hours or so that I put into it. And I took my time. I would listen to characters' dialogue interactions, and I'm just like moving my head left to right, looking at the different characters as they're talking and shit. Like early on, there's a family of construction workers, and you can just like go and slaughter this family of construction workers. A little fucking kid at the beginning of the game, he's talking shit nonstop. You shoot the damn kid if you want to. You run into his mom later on, and you're talking to the mom. Like, it's just fucking cool little interactions like that. And yeah, it's for sure. Like I said, by the end of the game, I could see some people being like, I'm done with it. I'm cutting this damn dialogue down to nothing. But I don't know. I had fun with the game, and yeah, it does end a bit abruptly, and then maybe they're trying to set up for something in the future. I absolutely think that I could see that very likely being the move, with High on Life performing really, really well. I believe it's the #1 most downloaded game of the year on Game Pass. So I could see Squanch Games wanting to go back to the well here and crank out a High on Life 2. Don't think that would be a bad decision, and I would absolutely be there checking it out day one. Really enjoyed the game, and let's see where it's sitting at on Metacritic. Holy shit. Okay. I did not know this. It's sitting at a 65 on Metacritic. Man, that's really weird to me. Like, even I don't even think like the actual gameplay of it is that low. Like, there's enough little interesting mechanics in there that would put it above a 65 for just the gameplay alone, even if it had like kind of generic dialogue. So, like I said, man, opinions differ on humor, I guess, and I don't know. I'm honestly kind of wowed by that. I did not expect that thing to be sitting at a fucking 65 there. To me, this is like a mid high sevens range, a 7, 7, 7, 8, 7, 9, somewhere in that range. Like, I thoroughly fucking enjoyed the game. Like I said, towards the back end, you do feel like you've started to see kind of the big heavy hitter jokes, but I don't know. I still just found everything pretty damn humorous. So I don't know. I'm much higher than a 6.5, but hey, like I said, it's on Game Pass. I don't think anybody would feel too burned for checking it out for a couple hours, even if they realized it wasn't for them. All right, so let's go ahead and run through these next few fairly quickly here. Rambled on a bit too long with Callisto and High on Life. Next up, let's talk about Marvel's Midnight Suns. Put about 12 hours into this. I'm not a Firaxis guy. I'm not a XCOM turn-based strategy guy, but I saw Wolverine, as a part of the group here, part of the Midnight Suns, and heard some X-Men ties with Sabretooth and some different X-Men characters in the game, and I was like, all right, let me dive into this thing and see what it's about. I'm a casual Marvel fan, but I really fuck with X-Men heavily. So I wanted to see what it was about, and I gotta say, I love the hub world. I love the Abbey, which is the hub world in Midnight Suns. It's like this mansion where you're going and just hanging out with the different Marvel characters. And it's like got this silly little dating sim angle to it, where you have to go and perform these hangout sessions to increase your bond and relationship with the different Marvel characters. And that's like useful in battle. And like it's so silly, but for whatever reason, I was like, this is a blast. Going out and playing video games with damn Spider-Man, going out and hanging out by the pool with fucking Magic or whatever. And you're not like, able to actually fucking bone these damn Marvel characters. It's just like little friendship hangs. But I don't know that for certain, because Blade he's out there. He's trying to get him a piece of old Captain Marvel. He fucking just got to a point where he created a whole book club where you have to go and participate in this book club with Blade, because he's trying to lay pipe to old Captain Marvel. So I don't know how that will materialize. I don't think it's a rated M game, so I'm thinking that it's all these relationships are probably platonic in Midnight Suns, but who the fuck knows? But yeah, man, I really do. I like those parts of the game. It's kind of silly and fun. You're running off and performing like these weird rituals with some of the Midnight Suns characters, and then spawning into these different portals. And the actual turn-based battle system of Midnight Suns was a lot more fun than I ever anticipated. Like, it's cool as shit to have this deck of cards laid out in front of you to start up your battle, and you have like 3 turns per hand, and you can like redraw if you don't like your cards. You have like 2 redraws per hand, and each character has their different heroic abilities, and you can perform like these big knockbacks where you're punching an enemy and they go flying into a crater, into an explosive barrel or some shit. And you have like Ghost Rider, who's performing his heroic ability where he takes his car and just fucking rams through a line of people. And if you can move your character once per battle or once per turn, and if you can line up like this clear one direction to go in, and like 3 enemies are back to back to back, you can take out all 3 of them in one attack. And that shit, it's a lot more fun than I would have anticipated with Midnight Suns. So I don't know, maybe I'll kind of keep my eye on these turn-based strategy games a little bit more. I played one a couple years ago with Empire of Sin, mafia kind of, old school mafia turn-based strategy style of game that I enjoyed quite a bit as well. A bunch of like simulation, like allocating stats and stuff with Empire of Sin that I found really cool. Like having to keep your club stocked up with a certain amount of booze and shit. Like that was definitely an interesting twist on the genre. But yeah, I dig the story, the overall story with Midnight Suns. I think it's fun. You're like risen from the grave. Your name is the Hunter, and you're trying to take out your mother, who her name is Lilith, and you were risen from the grave for that very purpose. It's like your destiny to fulfill that purpose. And the cool thing about Lilith is that she is very much preying on vulnerable, like, Marvel heroes. So anybody who has that moment of vulnerability where they let their guard down, or they're going through something, she's like seeking that shit out, man. She can sense the wounded out there, and she's going for you. And it creates a cool dynamic where you end up having to battle some of the beloved Marvel characters that you've known as these heroes, because she has like corrupted their mind, and she has like such a strong force field over their mind that they're having trouble breaking out of it. And some of the Midnight Suns they're not as forgiving as like the Avengers. You're running alongside, like I said, Blade and Magic, and some of these characters, they're not, well, actually Magic is a little bit more, for one of the characters that we're going up against now, she's actually more on the side of saving her. But there's definitely some animosity where certain characters are like, nah, fuck it, let's let it ride, let's kill these motherfuckers. Like, who cares if they're, were once a good guy? And I don't know, they like those little story dynamics are kind of interesting. So yeah, I've been enjoying the game. Like I said, only 12 or so hours into it, but the customization of it, having Tony Stark and what's his name, Doctor Strange down there, they have their little area where their little laboratory where they're going in, they're getting you different abilities, customizing your different loadouts and shit with them, and then you have your deck that you're able to go in and you get new cards from bringing back certain material and shit to Tony Stark and Doctor Strange. And then you can go in after you get these new cards, you go and you look through your deck, you can remove certain cards for the new cards that you just acquired. And if you go and train with Blade or any of the different Marvel characters, you can have specific upgrades that you can apply to those cards as well. So it's fun. I could see this being a very, very addictive ass gameplay loop. I've heard people say it ran them like 70 plus hours to get through it. Do I think I'll play through it for 70 hours? Probably not, but I would like to return to it and check it out a little bit more. Okay, and you know what? We'll run these next two together here for Final Fantasy VII Crisis Core Reunion and Neon White. I don't have a ton to say about either one, but we'll go ahead and throw these in here together. Final Fantasy VII Crisis Core Reunion, I was just expecting too much with this. I loved FF7, the remake part 1, and this is just not that. This is a lot more of a remaster of that PSP game. The dialogue is still really rough. The long pauses in between the different lines being delivered, and just the kind of slot machine ability thing where it's like constantly spinning during battle, and like if these three numbers match up, you'll get a special move or a special ability to use in battle. It just feels a little, I don't know, a little bit less strategic than how the combat system worked in Final Fantasy VII, the remake. You get like these cool ass little summons where you can summon these demons in battle, and they deliver like these huge attacks that deliver a bunch of damage to the enemy. But certain bosses can also do that to you. And so a lot of it, like I said, is dependent on getting this randomized number generator slot machine-esque thing to land in your favor, which I don't really love. But yeah, I mean, like I said, dialogue, not great. Story, not great. In my opinion, the early run of it, getting to play as Zack in Shinra, working for Shinra, kind of this more naive, upbeat style of character at the beginning of the game. I'm sure by the end that will flip on its head, but yeah, fusing the materia and stuff like that is still fun, but not a lot there for Final Fantasy VII Crisis Core Reunion, at least for me. I'll stick to the remakes and keep diving into FF7 Remake Part 2 and 3 and how many ever other fucking parts that they have. And Final Fantasy 16 looks super sick as well, but Crisis Core Reunion did not do it for me. Next up, Neon White finally came to PlayStation 5. Checked it out, and it is a fun little speed run first person shooter / parkour style of game. Played like 6 out of the 10 levels, and I think it's definitely a fun little game. It's not, I was hearing crazy reviews for it earlier in the year, people giving it 10 out of 10s and 9 out of 10s and shit. I definitely don't think it's anything on that level. I find the story to be wildly unnecessary and annoying. It's kind of told in this visual novel sort of language and in this visual novel sort of aesthetic, and it's incredibly verbose and long-winded, which I guess who am I to talk about fucking long-winded, but the story just goes on, man, and thankfully you can skip through it, which I ended up just having to skip through that shit to get back to the fun gameplay sections. But once again, talking about Midnight Suns with the card system, Neon White, similar thing here with the card system. You get these different cards as you're going along, doing your speed run, trying to get to the end of a level at a certain time. You get these cards, and cards can perform specific attacks. Like some will elevate you, like with a super jump. Some you can use as like different weapons in that first person shooter fashion, get like pistols and then automatic rifles and shit. But they also have abilities where you can use the rifle to throw off a little bomb, and then that bomb, if you jump at the right time, can elevate you. The pistol has the side ability where it will elevate you, and it just becomes this fun loop where you're looking for any way to reach your destination to finish the level as quickly as possible, and picking up your little stomp ability and stomping down just so you can get to the end as quickly as possible. Like you're saving your cards for using them at the right time to be as quick to finish the level as humanly possible. And yeah, I think it is for sure fun. Each level only takes like 30 seconds or so to complete, so you're constantly seeing something new. It's refreshing, giving you a new level to try to figure out, and that is fun. It's, like I said, not that 10 out of 10 style of game for me, but I did find it really damn fun. I don't think I'll be continuing it on because there's not really that thing that I'm waiting to see or wanting to go back to for the story, or wanting to see get resolved with the story. And just completing levels for the sake of completing levels isn't really keeping me there, but it is no doubt a fun game. Okay, so I'm getting out of your hair, guys. I appreciate you all for tuning in. Sorry for the long-winded rambles there for Callisto and High on Life, but I do appreciate you all for tuning in. Like I said, hope you all had a happy holiday season. And yeah, let me know down in the comments what you have been playing in the last month or so. As always, love chatting with you good people. But yeah, man, hit me up, and I will see you guys soon. Goodbye.